Russia is strongly against outside interference in Syria, saying it's up to the Syrians themselves to decide their future. Let's get more reaction on the conflict from Patrick Hayes. He is a reporter from the online Spiked magazine. He joins us from London. Peter, Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov said Moscow will not let the UN Security Council sanction military action on Syria, fearing that a Libya-style scenario would emerge. What's your take on all of this?
I think it's important to see what has actually happened in Libya since Western intervention last year. Effectively, you've had a vacuum. Libya's splintering into city-states, and there's no great emergence of democracy, or, the Libyan people are not being able to emerge due to the actions of Obama, Cameron, and the then French President Sarkozy. Libya has been made into a mess by Western intervention. And I think it's very important to remember that when talking about Syria in this situation. Now, last year, the when the UN Security Council were making its decision, Russia did abstain from that. I think it is very important to rule out military intervention, to say, actually, this is the worst possible scenario in terms of allowing the Syrian people to decide their own fates. Yes, the situation in Syria is horrid at the moment. I mean, anyone with an ounce of humanity in them would, over the last week, really be troubled by the massacres that are taking place there, by the fighting that is taking place. But you have to resist that knee-jerk impulse to want to try and intervene into other countries' sovereign conflicts and to say we can just step in and make things better. In many situations, and this would be the case in Syria, Western intervention would intensify the conflict and potentially make it far worse than it is now. It's always important to bear that in mind when thinking about how best to intervene in these conflicts. Often the best intervention is not to intervene at all.
Now, Moscow says external players provoke Syrian rebels to continue fighting despite Kofi Annan's peace plan. Do you think Russia will be able to unite backers of the regime change in Syria and give up their intervention plans?
Well, it becomes very difficult because you hear, for example, one minute Secretary of State from the US, Hillary Clinton, for example, is saying that she fully supports the Annan plan. The next minute she's saying that it's really important that Assad leaves now, and it's important to put the pressure on, and we need to move forward to a Yemeni-style solution in Syria. You're getting these mixed messages from the West, from Clinton in particular, and she just can't help herself but meddle to use this opportunity for cheap grandstanding, in which she gives the semblance of some sense that she's in control in Syria and should direct the situation. And fundamentally, it undermines the ability of the Syrian people to determine their own futures. When you have the Secretary of State ordering that the head of state of Syria should leave, you just think, well, this isn't. Where's the democracy in this? Where is the democracy from these external forces pressuring sovereign countries into taking a certain direction according to their particular whims or their particular interpretation at a certain point in time?
Now, where do you think these calls for foreign intervention will end, with Syria's opposition urging military action, and you have Washington, as you just mentioned, voicing its so-called readiness to act?
I think there's, in the run-up to the US election, there doesn't seem to be a great stomach for intervention at this point. I think there's a lot of calls for it, there's a lot of grandstanding, there's a lot of rhetoric from Clinton, from the UN General Secretary and others, which I think are actually really not helping the situation in terms of being able to allow the Syrian people to negotiate the future of the country for themselves. In terms of Western intervention, I don't think there is an appetite at present for a Libyan model, but I think that's always on the cards. And I think the desire at the moment is to try and effectively push the bucket onto Russia, put pressure onto Russia to try and resolve the situation and say, well, you're responsible for Assad. Opposing intervention isn't the same as actually legitimising what's happening in a particular country. It's saying this is a sovereign country, the people of this country need to determine their own affairs, and we need to allow them and give them the space to do that, because our interference could warp the conflict, make it bloodier, more drawn out and more intensified than before. And it's very important to make that distinction, and it's something that the West cannot do now. They see themselves, the US, the UK, France in particular, see themselves almost like, Amnesty International style NGOs that go around the world and intervene into conflicts. rather than countries that have particular interests, like Russia and China, and assert them. And I think that's NGO amnesty-style attitudes of Western governments could actually be potentially very dangerous and could actually, as I said, intensify and worsen the conflicts in countries such as Syria. It's very important to remember the Libyan model and the mess that they left in the wake of that. They don't talk about Libya now in relation to Syria, they talk about Yemen. It's important that we learn from the mistakes of Libya and not repeat them here.
All right, Patrick, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Patrick Hayes from the online magazine Spike, thank you.